I love California. Living here is like cheating the system. At least that's what I thought as I drove my screaming yellow Euro 6 Mustang GT through the darkened streets. If I still lived in Michigan, there is no way I would continue to drive my car on New Year's Eve. Instead, I would be driving my Jeep through knee-deep snow and cold instead of driving back to my mother-in-law's after buying beer. I didn't mind going out for a beer. Every opportunity to get behind the wheel of my little toy was a pleasure. But what I really didn't like was that I always had to make 2 or 3 of these trips. It was always the same, "Danny, we didn't bring enough beer. Could you go and get some?" And so I set off again along the twisting and winding avenues of their residential area. I kept it to a 35-minute circle. 10 minutes there, 10 back, and a maximum of 15 minutes inside the liquor store on Arcana Boulevard. So if I'm driving, there'll be a beer or something in 35 minutes. If someone else goes, it will take much longer. It's just a shame she's so stingy. Why not just make a list and let me buy everything in one go? It felt like something else was going on. An ordinary person would probably think so, but not me. Have you all heard the expression, ignorance is bliss? Well, Danny Masterson, I must have lived an extremely happy life because I had no idea what was going on. I jumped out of my stang with a smile on my face and a song in my heart. I was even fucking whistling as I walked up to the door, both hands full of stacked cases of beer. What a fool I have been. I put the beer down to open the door and heard loud music before the door even opened. I entered the living room. I looked around for my mother-in-law Jane and saw her huddled in the corner with one of the guys she works with. What a bitch she is. Her husband is a cop and he was forced to work tonight protecting the city. And how does she repay him? Sitting on his couch making out with some creep while he's at work? I slammed the cases of beer onto the table next to her. "Get up and get your beer yourself from now on," I shouted to her. I looked around the room for my wife Kara and didn't see her. I started pushing through people. For some reason, many of the people present seemed to want to talk to me. But I was no longer in the mood to talk. I just wanted to find Kara, tell her what her sister had done, and get out of there. I started looking for her from room to room and could not find her. So I went upstairs. A couple of guys tried to block my path, but to no avail. I easily slipped past them. I noticed Jane following me, looking scared, but I didn't have time to listen to her bullshit right now. Finally, at Jane and Randy's bedroom door, I heard voices. It seemed like it was Kara. So I opened the door. The room was dimly lit, but not so dimly lit that I couldn't see the scene on the bed. There were 5 or 6 guys, gathered around the bed, having sex scenes with my wife. I took a couple of pictures with my phone and made a short video. I walked up and hit the guy closest to me between the legs. He screamed and fell to the floor. The people on the bed had not yet noticed, but those gathered around began to scatter. I grabbed a pen from the table and stuck it in the ass of the guy who was having sex with her. He screamed in pain and started jumping. The other 2 guys started packing their things and denying everything when they noticed me. Kara just sat there in shock. "You shouldn't go home," I told her. "Never." "Danny, please wait," she cried, tears running down her cheeks. I turned and started to leave, but Jane bumped into me. "Danny," she began. "Your bitch sister can stay here with you," I said calmly. "But she's your wife and she loves you. This was supposed to be the last time," she said. "You really need to shut up before you get yourself into trouble," I replied sharply. "I have photographs of you in action. How do you think your husband will feel when he sees them?" "Danny, please don't show them. He'll never understand. It didn't mean anything, it's—" She was interrupted by Kara running out of the room and trying to grab me. "Danny, please, you have to believe me, Tears streamed down her face as I simply turned and walked down the stairs. I heard her running after me, but by the time she got dressed and got to the door, the roar of my Mustang V8 was fading into the distance. I drove up to our neighbor's house as their teenage daughter was babysitting our 2 boys. "Hello, Mr. M," said a girl with a pimply face and sleepy eyes. "It's not even 11 o'clock yet. I thought they were going to stay all night." "Well, I got bored," I said cheerfully. "I thought if I took them early, you'd have a chance to go out and have some fun yourself. How much did Kara say we'd pay you?" "Well, she said $50, the girl said nervously. I was sure she was lying. but I gave her 75, which made her smile hugely through her braces. I walked the two sleepy boys to the back of my car and drove away. As I drove, I didn't think about how badly I was hurt, or why, or any of the 1,000 things that were running through my head. I just focused on what my next step would be. Obviously, my first step was taking care of my children. My parents lived about an hour out of town, so I called them before it was too late and told them I was coming. There were about 10 messages on my cell phone from Kara and one from Jane. I called Jane and told her to give me a night to think about it. "What else do you need to think about? This girl loves you," she said. "Okay, she made a mistake. Forgive her, and at least talk to her." "Jane, you are in no position to dictate what I do or don't do," I replied sharply. "I'm still deciding whether to tell your husband about you too, so just shut up and listen to why I called you." The phone line went silent. I realized that she was angry because Jane was not used to listening to someone else. I also heard Kara sobbing in the background. "Tell your sister," I began. "You mean your wife," she interrupted. "You're angry with her, and you probably should be. It'll probably take a while before you can forgive her, but, Danny, don't ever think that what you saw was anything more than just a little holiday fun, which got out of control. And please never doubt that she loves you, and you loved her enough to marry her." "Not anymore," I said. "Just tell her I need a couple of days to think about it, and I'll call her and we can talk after that. Also, tell Doug Martin and Fred Simmons and the other guys that were in the room that they need to call me soon, or I'll mention them in the divorce. And who knows what that will do to their marriages. If they're still there, I'll tell them myself. Hand them the phone." "Danny, the party kind of ended after you left. Two had to leave for the hospital." I then heard more crying from Kara in the background. "Danny, please tell me you're not serious about getting a divorce. It's just a New Year's party, damn it. It's never hurt you before. And this was supposed to be the last time." "What the hell do you mean this? You mean she's done this before?" I asked sharply. "How long did it last?" The phone line went silent, and I heard Kara's tearful voice on the phone. "Danny," she said. Her voice sounded so sad and so pitiful that I almost felt sad too. Then I remembered the last thing I saw and just hung up. The boys fell asleep in the Mustang's cramped back seats. Luckily, they visited their grandparents often, so there was always fresh clothes for them. I really didn't know what would happen in the next few days, but I needed to protect my boys from all of this as much as possible. I pulled up to my parents' house, and the porch light came on before I could even stop the car. My mom and dad came out to meet me, and my mom took the boys into the guest room while Dad and I talked. "What's happening?" he asked me. "Dad, for now let's just say that Kara and I have our differences and keep it to ourselves," I said. "Well, what have you done?" he asked me. "Is it so bad that flowers and a serious apology won't help? I always thought that girl was too good for you." "I'll call you tomorrow, Dad," I said as I got in the car and drove home. The phone was already ringing when I went inside. I looked at the caller ID and saw Kara's cell phone number. I turned off the phone. Then I went to bed in the guest room. For some reason, I didn't like the idea of getting into the bed we'd just been in together hours before. The next morning was New Year's, but I wasn't in the mood for football games or festive food. I called the boys first in the morning to see how they were doing. They were having a great time and didn't seem bothered by it all at all. The next thing I did was call Ernie Banks, my lawyer, and leave a message on his voicemail. I told him I knew he was out of the office, but it was an emergency, and I needed him to call me back as soon as possible. I went online and started looking for locksmiths, looking through ad after ad, until I found one that offered a 24-hour emergency line. I called the guy and had him come to the house to change the locks right away. Then I took up regular banking business. I canceled all joint credit cards and transferred half of our available funds to accounts in my name only. Even though Kara wasn't working, I thought it was fair to leave her half of our money. Since I was going to seek full custody of our boys, I wanted to keep the house. As soon as I hung up the phone, it rang again. I picked up the phone out of habit, and as soon as I heard Jane's voice, I began to put it back. "Danny, I need to talk to you. Now that you've calmed down, Can you please talk to Kara? She hasn't slept all night. She couldn't even lie down. She's just been pacing all damn night. She's not eating. She's terrible. Because of what happened last night. She just sits there and cries. Find a bunch of guys so she can get into bed pretty easily, I replied sharply. It was less than 12 hours, so her lack of food is unlikely to be serious, and it wouldn't be my problem even if it were. Danny, please don't tell Randy about me. I swear I learned my lesson. Randy is a cop. This could get really bad for me and a lot of the people that were at the party. Jane, I was looking for Kara so we could get out of your party and go home last night when I found her during her performance. Did you notice that most of the people there weren't cheating on their spouses? Most of them were there to party with you, either with the person they love or meet someone they might love. You, Kara, and her adult toys were the only cheaters. I really don't care what happens to you, but I'll tell you this if you help me. I won't give you away, I told her. Doug wants you to come to the hospital to see him, or he'll call you. He's really scared because his wife controls all the money in their marriage, she said. The others also left you messages because your phone was turned off. Danny, do you really want to ruin 6 other marriages because you're mad at my sister? Are you really that selfish? Are you really that cruel? Jane, you ignorant, frivolous girl. I loved your sister more than anyone in the world. She was my life, my heart, and my soul, all wrapped up in one special person. There is nothing I wouldn't do for her. For the fact that you took that away from me is something people should pay for. So yes, it's quite possible that we'll start the new year with 6 shiny new scams. But Danny, no one took her from you. She's still here and loves you so much, it's tearing her apart. If you divorce her, it will just destroy her. You mean how she destroyed me last night when I walked into your room and found the woman I loved having sex with 5 guys? Does she feel that bad, Jane? So what if she offers you a wild card? You can choose any woman you want and sleep with her, and when that happens, she won't have the right to say a word about it. Well, Jane, shouldn't that be 5 wild cards? And who knows how many times this has already happened, so I might be forced to sleep with half of Southern California just to get revenge. And guess what? Then we'll have whatever, no matter what. It definitely won't be a marriage. I just want one woman who loves me and wants to be with me, who wants to raise our children together and grow old together. That's all I need. But Danny, it's me. Kara interrupted into the phone with a complaint in her voice, and I immediately hung up. I called Jane's cell phone and she answered. Next time you try this shit, I'll arrange a meeting with your husband, and I won't do it at your house. I'll arrange to meet him at the damn police station and in front of all these other cops. I'll show him a video of you playing sex games on his couch, I said sharply. What have I done? She asked, clearly scared. I already told you I don't want to talk to your cheating sister under any circumstances whatsoever, I said. The next time I talk to you and even hear her voice, I'll call Randy. But it's not my fault. She just picked up the phone. She's so desperate to talk to you, Jane said complainingly. Your problem, not mine, I replied sharply. Maybe you should explain to her that the best thing for her to do is to give me some space for a while, because every time I hear her voice, I get angrier. After I hung up, I stood back and just breathed. I released all the pent-up stress and thought about my marriage and where I might have gone wrong. We had been married for 8 years, and I loved her more now than when we were first together. Kara and her sister were both pretty promiscuous when we first met, and I guess I fooled myself into thinking she gave it all up for me. At first, I kind of expected her to do something, so I often came home unexpectedly in the middle of the day. But the only thing I ever got for my troubles was lunch or sex or both. Over time and after 2 kids, I guess I let my guard down and I never expected her to do anything when I was with her and at a social party. Our sex life was never what you, or at least I, considered boring. We always tried different things to keep things exciting. I was willing to try anything she suggested if it was just the 2 of us. After seeing her with all these guys, it's obvious that I just wasn't enough for her. So even though I loved her so much that my heart was hurting right now, I just couldn't see the possibility of continuing to be married to her. My thoughts were interrupted by a knock on the door. I got up and went to open it, and all my anger returned. It was Joe Stevens, standing there with his eyes down on the ground. I opened the door so he could enter. "Why the hell are you here?" I growled at him. "Well, Jane said you wanted to talk to me about last night. I know you're angry. So before you try to bully me, can I tell my side of the story?" He said. "Well, you're here, so go ahead," I replied sharply, staring at him. "Danny, I know we're not close, but I've always considered you a friend. I knew Jane and Kara before you were married. They were always pretty free-spirited, and I never expected one of them to settle down. When you met Kara, she seemed happy. Happier than I've ever seen, but I didn't expect it to last. She's never stayed with one guy for more than 3 months, including me, in her entire life. When I say including me, I mean it. I was her first real boyfriend for the 6 weeks it lasted. And she was the first girl I ever slept with, but I wasn't her first," he said. I could tell by the look on his face when he said this that he was telling the truth. So I started to calm down. "Wait, let's sit while you tell me this. I think I'm going to need a beer. Would you like one?" I asked. "I'll sit down, but after last night, no more alcohol for me," he said. After I returned from the kitchen with a Corona for me and a Pepsi for him, he started talking again. "When we found out you were going to marry Kara, I felt sorry for you, because you seemed like a great guy. But I knew you were in for heartbreak. She's just never been the kind of girl I would expect to settle down with the same guy and will remain faithful. Of course, I wished you both the best and was at your wedding, but I never expected you to even live to see your first anniversary." Kara and Jane had a tradition right after graduating from college to have a big party on New Year. It started when Kara was 22 and Jane was 24, so it went on for about 14 years. At that party, it didn't matter who they dated. Those two always slept with any interested guys that were there. Some guys slept with both sisters. These girls didn't care. When they got married, I expected it to stop, especially because I believed that Kara really loved you, but to my surprise, it didn't stop. He paused, took a sip of his soda, and looked at me, then started talking again. "You got married in the summer. I forgot the month and year, but damn, I barely remember my own anniversary, let alone anyone else's. Anyway, the same year you got married, less than 6 months passed, and I found out that the party would still go ahead as usual. I was pretty shocked and met Kara a few weeks before the party and asked how your marriage was going, and she was all smiles and just beaming when she talked about it. I just couldn't imagine that a woman who loved so much could do what she did, but it happened. Both of them, she and Jane, made it seem like you and Jane's husband knew about it. In fact, that's why Jane's husband is almost never there. She said he accepts that she needs to do it, but he doesn't like seeing it or being there. Kara even said you were okay with it. I mean, you even go to parties with her and you keep the liquor flowing. Now I'm starting to see the real picture," he said and sighed. "Danny, for your own peace of mind, you have to do what your conscience tells you. I got married 5 years ago, and I really love my wife. When I got married, I stopped participating in these parties. 2 years ago, if you remember, I got the chance to ride in your Mustang because I went out with you to get a beer. But this year my wife went to visit her pregnant sister, so I was alone and feeling lonely. I was also drunk, so I admit I got in line. I didn't even get to touch Kara before you arrived, and I was lucky to get out before you did anything to me, but I'm sure you took a photo of me. That's why I'm here." He was still looking at me with difficulty, and I could feel the pain in his voice. "Danny, you don't have to worry about telling Dorothy because I'll tell her myself and hope she forgives me. I didn't really do anything, but I was going to do it. And when I look at you and Kara, I see where it could lead me. We'd be in the same places, only in reverse. I'd be Kara sitting there, crying my eyes out because I did something stupid for a few moments of pleasure and lost a whole life of happiness. And my Dorothy would be you, miserable and betrayed for reasons that just don't make sense when she never did anything to deserve it. Anyway, I want to tell you again that I haven't even touched Kara last night. I also want to tell you that there were only 2 reasons why I even ended up in that situation. Firstly, I was very drunk, which is why I gave up alcohol forever. And secondly, because there was some closure, the end of a chapter in my life, one way or another. He paused again. Danny, you really changed Kara. Whether you see it or not, I've known her all her life and I can see it. Last night, right after you left for the beer and all the guys started coming upstairs, including me, she told all these guys that last night would be the last time she would ever have sex with anyone other than you because she loves you and just can't take it anymore. So last night really should have been her last performance, whether it meant anything to you or not, he said. Like I told you before, I've known Kara her whole life, and even when she was dating a guy, she always had her eyes on the next one. I could never imagine that she could be happy with just one guy, but I really think that she's happy and really loves you. Even before all this that happened last night, you and her boys were all she talked about. They say a leopard doesn't change its spots, but I really believe that Kara has changed. And I went to see her this morning before coming here. And you really should see her. She's really torn about this, he said. Anyway, you can do as you see fit. I just came here to apologize and say that I will do whatever you want to fix this. After he left, I sat there and thought for a long time, only becoming more confused. What hurt me the most was finding out how long this went on behind my back. When Jane told me that last night was not the first time, I thought that perhaps it had happened at a party another time and she thought I knew about it. But now I realized that the woman I had married and loved with all my heart could not feel for me what I felt for her. She never stopped cheating on me. She obviously did this when we were dating and throughout our marriage, and will probably never stop. Even if she was sincerely going to give it up now, how the hell could I believe or trust her again? She could bring me illness at any moment. Did I really know that the boys were mine? I packed all of Kara's belongings and personal items she might need for an extended stay into her car. Before I finished packing Kara's things, Ernie called me back. I explained the situation to him and told him what I wanted. I also told him that I wanted full custody of our boys if they were mine. I told him I would probably also blame at least 2 men from last night's party. I sent him a video with Kara and photos too. Before I could finish packing Kara's things, the doorbell rang again. I was ready to meet another one of those guys from last night's party and was surprised to see a woman standing there and a taxi in my driveway. She was a very beautiful woman with features that were different but still reminiscent of Kara and Jane. Where both Kara and Jane could be considered plus size, she was slimmer but still had their curves. There were several wrinkles on her face, and she was obviously older than her sisters. She was also older than me, but her overall impression was still amazing. "Hey, Danny," she said, setting down her suitcase and extending her hand. "Hi back," I mumbled, wondering who this woman was and why the hell she had a suitcase. "Where is my daughter?" she asked, looking around. "Whose daughter's yours?" I asked in response. "Kara and Jane," she said with a smile. "You're married to Kara, and apparently I have 2 grandchildren I've never met. I know this is a big surprise for you, and I have no way of proving it to you, but I'm sure Kara will recognize me. Can I send my taxi?" I simply nodded my head and stepped aside so she could enter. "You don't have to prove anything to me," I said. "I see the resemblance, so I have no doubt that you are who you say you are. But I thought you were dead. Neither Kara nor Jane ever talked about family except each other, so I just assumed when they said you left that they meant, well, you know." "This must be quite a shock to you," she said, smiling again. "Actually," I said, "I've had a lot of shocks in the last 24 hours, and this is far from the biggest or the worst. In fact, your appearance and your presence might actually help me. As you can see, neither Kara nor Jane are here, but I can take you to them," I said. "That would be great," she said, and that smile came back. I explained to her that Kara would be staying at Jane's for a while, and I was on my way to drop off some things for her. She just nodded and followed me outside. "Looks like you're taking more than a few of her things," she said. "Well, I don't know how long she'll be there," I replied. "So Jane and Randy are having problems again, huh?" she asked. "Something like that," I said, surprised how a woman who had never met me or Randy knew so much about us. "It'll probably be best if you go in Kara's car," I said, "and you can just follow me there. That way she can have her car and her things, and you can go with them." That sounds good, she said cheerfully. I have to admit, even though I didn't know the woman's name, her mood began to attract me. Since her appearance, I have become calmer. My own mother had a similar influence on me, although my father and I rarely agreed on any issue. Mostly because my dad thought his shit didn't stink and I was the only one telling him it didn't. I drove much slower than usual so as not to lose her, and we arrived at Jane's house in about 20 minutes. Randy came out to meet me when I arrived. He hugged my shoulder tightly and looked at me. "Danny, what the hell is going on?" he asked. "You two are the happiest people I know. That girl loves you more than I've ever seen. I'd die for someone to love me like that. She's so miserable right now it almost makes me want to cry, but no one says anything." He looked really helpless, like he wanted to do something or hit someone, but didn't know who. We were saved from a further awkward moment when the door opened and Jane stuck her head out. When she saw me talking to Randy, she got a tense look on her face and stuck her head back into the house. She hesitated before approaching us, and then the door opened wider and Kara ran out. From what I was told, she looked terrible. There were large circles under her eyes, and her eyes were so puffy that it was a miracle she could see at all. My shock at the sight of her turned to disgust when I realized that she was heading straight towards me. Just then, Kara's car door opened and a woman got out. If I had any doubt that this was indeed Kara and Jane's mother, it was immediately dispelled. "Danny, who's, Mom?" Kara began. "Who?" exclaimed Randy. "What the hell is she doing here and why did you bring her to my house?" Jane said sharply. Seeing the three women together was interesting for many reasons. Firstly, three of them represented three completely different body types. First, there was my Kara. She was short and curvy, not particularly big-breasted, but her ass was a work of art. She was a little plump and had a round belly from having 2 children. Kara had short, shoulder-length blonde hair. Her eyes and nose were almost exact copies of other women. Then there was Jane. She was taller than both of the others. Jane had very large breasts. Jane had long, thick brown hippie hair. I often joked that she wore her hair so long to hide her missing ass. The woman standing between them was clearly the original. Their daughters inherited parts of her, but neither received the entire package. Their mother was approximately 5'6", tall, putting her somewhere between Karen's 5'1" height and Jane's 5'10" height. She had a nice set of breasts, not as huge as Jane's, but perfectly suited to her shape. She also had the kind of ass that made any outfit look good. It wasn't as big as Kara's, but it wasn't far behind. She had dark red-colored hair, and if you looked closely, you could see accents of Kara's blonde shade and some dark brown undertones that reflected Jane's brunette personality, too. Of course, there were a few gray strands there. Her face was exactly the same as the 2 young women's, only with a little more lines on it and an expression of both experience and, I don't know how best to describe it, but she seemed at peace with herself in a way that her daughters were not. Maybe it was just the upcoming divorces, maybe not. But she seemed like someone who had been through hell, survived, and learned to accept herself for who she was. She didn't have to pretend or try to promote herself because she knew who she was and accepted it. "What the hell are you doing here? How did you find us?" Jane asked sharply, breaking the silence. "Hello to you too, dear," said her mother. "I have hired private investigators to check on you from time to time over the past few years. For most of the significant events in your life, I have been there, maybe not in person, but in spirit. Through the magic of video, I have indirectly enjoyed many of the events with you. I was at Kara and Danny's wedding. I even had a piece of her cake, but the next day, I was at your wedding too, Jane dear. Although I didn't get a piece of your cake, I know all about your on and off fights with Randy here, mostly due to the stress of his work and your absence. I saw my 2 grandchildren, from birth until now. Maybe not in person, but I was there the same way. Kara, have you ever wondered who sent you these anonymous cards for children's birthdays or your own? Well, now you know." "Just wonderful," Jane said. "As if we don't have enough stress already. Now we also have you following us around." "Mom," Kara said, "why do you—" "What the hell do you want?" Jane interrupted. "You gave us away. You're not supposed to just show up and settle into our lives. My husband is a cop. I'll have a restraining order against you by tomorrow, so whatever you want to say it and get out. I don't want anything from you. I was just hoping that, now that you're both adults, we could spend time together, talk and deal with the past. Maybe even put this behind us and let me be a part of my children's lives. That's what I want to. Well, in the words of Daffy Duck, "Thank you for stopping by," said Jane coldly. "If you go the way you came and keep it all the way, then turn left or right. I'm absolutely fine with it. No matter where it will take you from here. The sooner, the better." Then she turned to me. "What did you talk to Randy about, my dear brother-in-law?" she asked. "Or are you just here to see Kara?" "Danny, honey, you missed me so much," Kara said. "I'm so glad you came to me. I know we can get through this. I was wrong, I admit it, and I'll do anything to make it right." She was almost hysterical when she said this, and kept coming closer to me. I was retreating. It almost looked like she was chasing me around my Mustang in slow motion. If I wasn't involved in this and wasn't so devastated, it would be fucking funny. Finally, the excitement wore off, and I just said, "Stop, Kara. You should have given me time to think. Remember, I tried to be nice. I brought you your clothes and personal items, as well as your car. But if you insist on being pushy, it could all end right now. I even brought your mom to be with you and Jane. Maybe my problem is that I'm too kind and too trusting of people who don't deserve it." "Danny, what do you need to think about?" Randy asked. "You need to tell me what's going on. Sorry, dude. I thought you did something to upset Kara. That's how Jane put it, but I'm starting to realize I was wrong, aren't I?" He looked at Jane with the same expression the cops always use when they catch someone committing a crime or lying. "How does Jane fit into this picture?" he asked me seriously. "Listen, Randy, you and I will sit down and talk as soon as I come to my senses. There are a few more people from the party that I need to talk to, and I still have a meeting with Ernie tomorrow, but we'll definitely talk. I promise." Both sisters started talking at the same time. "No!" Kara shouted. "Danny, please! Anything but this. We don't need Ernie. This is us. We'll be together forever, no matter what. You promised me this." "Yes, but you promised me something too," I said sadly. Kara just sat down on the ground and started crying. "Danny, you don't need to drag other people into your problems," Jane said. "Just because I support my sister doesn't mean you have to talk to Randy." She suddenly stopped talking and almost bit her tongue when I looked at her. I could tell she was trying to make Randy think her only involvement was helping Kara. She quickly changed tactics. "Well, at least you can take Sandra to the airport or to the motel. I don't care where," she said sharply. "Even if we talked, there's no room for her here. Kara sleeps in our second bedroom, and the bed is too small for two. Well, at least now I know the name of my mother-in-law. Kara, if you're wondering, that's basically unknown to me since you didn't ask. The boys will be staying with my parents for a few days while we figure it out one way or another. I didn't see the point in dragging them into this and making their lives worse because of such nonsense. I also didn't tell them anything, so they're just having a good time with their grandparents, at least until they have to find out." It seemed like Kara didn't even hear me. She just sat on the ground in the driveway and cried at the top of her lungs. If this were a scene from a movie, the movie would be damn sad. 5 adults, all upset for different reasons, not looking at each other and not knowing who to trust. Randy was upset with me because he thought I was withholding information from him. He felt that his wife was somehow involved in this and did not know whether he wanted to know or not. I was jealous of him in a way. At least he got a warning, so his blow will be softer. He learned the news bit by bit, if at all. First, he got a warning that something was going on. Then he learned that Jane had something to do with it. And finally, he heard the news. His situation is not like mine. I had no idea what a bitch Kara was until I caught her in action, satisfying at least 5 guys. 5 guys I knew who were probably laughing at me behind my back our entire time together. They were probably laughing before we got married. I felt like the latest contestant on that new TV show, Who Can We Fool into Marrying the City Bitch? Jane was upset, primarily because Jane always gets angry about something. This time she actually had a reason to be angry. She was angry at Kara, not because Kara did what she did, but because she got caught and started this whole thing. She was angry with me because I caught her in the act and kept her marriage in the balance. She also knew that deep down I despised her and considered her partly to blame for what happened to Kara and to me. She was angry at Randy because she knew he would never understand what she did and she knew she would lose him, and because, in her own way, she loved him, and losing him would be hard for her. She was also angry at her mother, but I didn't know where that came from. Kara was angry at Jane, but I didn't know why. She was mostly upset because she had been caught with her hand in a cookie, and now she had to be punished. I didn't try to understand her feelings or motives because I didn't know her. Before yesterday, if someone had told me that Kara was cheating on me, I would have taken it both ways. I would laugh in his face and take revenge on him, but I wouldn't believe it. One of the cornerstones of my life was the fact that Kara loved me, and now that was destroyed. Sandra was upset because even after all these years, her only children were not ready to forgive her for what she had done in the past, and also because she saw that there was a big problem here, and no one was allowing her to intervene to help. She had to just watch and do nothing. We all know why I was upset, so let's move on to something else. There was nothing left to do, but Sandra and I got into my Mustang and drove away. Well, that was fun, I said, trying to lighten the mood during the ride back. I guess I should have written a letter or called before I just showed up, she replied. I don't have a return ticket booked yet, because I was planning on renting an apartment and staying here if everything works out. You can just drop me off at any motel we pass by, she said sadly. I looked at her and saw that she was trying to hide her tears. She suffered as much as all of us. I imagined if I had a fight with my boys and tried to get back into their lives, and they would reject me the way Jane rejected her, I would be devastated. She was so lost in thought that she never looked up during the entire trip back. When I pulled the car into the driveway and turned off the engine, she knew we were back home. You forgot about my motel, Danny, she said. No, ma'am, this is your motel. I have plenty of space. And if you stay long enough, maybe you can meet your grandchildren. Besides, maybe you shouldn't be alone after such a disappointment. You don't seem to be the one, either, a person who would just give up, I told her. She laughed a little at this and nodded her head. I offered Sandra, or Sandy as she told me to call her, our guest room. She showered and went straight to bed that night. The next morning I woke up and the house smelled wonderful. I looked at my watch and realized I had overslept, but it didn't matter since I didn't have to go back to work until Wednesday, and I wasn't sure I'd be back at all then. The boys also had the next 2 days off, so everything was fine. I needed to find out where this smell was coming from. I went downstairs and found Sandy in the kitchen. She set 2 plates and prepared coffee and pancakes, as well as the delicious bacon that was the smell. I had to use your machine. I'm sorry, she said. You only had fake bacon. You had turkey bacon and tofu bacon. How do they make tofu bacon? She smiled when she said that. Her accent had that Midwestern edge to it. It was a nice change from all the fake California surfer talk that even people who moved here from other parts of the country tried to emulate. It sounded genuine and warm. Danny, I know I'm an outsider in all of this, but I think we really need to talk, she said. I promise, Sandy, I said. I have a lot to do today, but we can talk over dinner. I'll be grilling in the backyard so we can relax and talk. Okay, she said, trying to smile. I went to Ernie's as soon as I finished breakfast. We talked about strategy and what I wanted. I also found out that Kara had called him several times since last night and told him not to take me on as a client because she didn't want a divorce. She even threatened to sue him if he helped me. He ended up having to talk to her only to tell her that I had already hired him before she called him, so the decision was mine and that she might need to hire a lawyer herself to protect her interests. After watching the videos and photos, Ernie was shocked, and he had seen many divorces. I'm still not sure divorce is the best option for you, he told me. Yes, the photos are terrible and shocking, But she obviously loves you and regrets what she did. Maybe she will stop. And by the looks of it, you still love her too. Your life will be hell without her for a very long time. Plus, you should think about your children. May I suggest family counseling? Hell no, I blurted out. What is it, Ernie? You should be my damn lawyer. I know what I want. Your job is to get it for me. You're right. It's going to be hard for her, but she's been having sex her whole life. With guys and then dumping them, that's just her pattern. She let me hang around her a little longer than usual, but overall, I'm just another brick in her wall. You're also right. It will be hard for me. It will be. Right now, I feel like someone tore my heart out with a rusty shovel, but it will be even harder for me trying to forget what she did. It will be even harder to look at myself in the mirror every morning and try to gain some respect for myself if I let her get away with it. But the hardest thing of all is standing in front of my boys and trying to teach them what is right and what is wrong, how to treat people with respect, and won't tolerate disrespect if I just sit back like some little wimp and let her do that shit. So, Ernie, with all due respect, I'm not paying you to be my damn psychologist or my damn priest. I need a lawyer, and I need a cruel dog lawyer who will be on my side and willing to burn the earth if necessary so that his client will get some kind of justice. If it's not you, let me know now. Ernie told me the documents would be ready in 2 days. He will also get a restraining order to keep her away from me and the kids. He believed that I could use her acts of depravity and lewdness in public as evidence that she was an unfit mother. It would have been a terrible thing to do, and I would never have stopped her from seeing boys whenever she wanted, but it was necessary because unless the mother was proven unfit, children never went to their fathers, even when the mother was at fault. Usually the house was left with the children. He said the restraining order would be in effect tomorrow and told me not to see her until then. We were also going to sue the other men except Joe Stevens. Joe earned himself an indulgence for his honesty and for respecting me enough to come and see me. The rest will simply burn out. When I got home, Sandy was asleep on the living room couch. One of our photo albums lay open on her chest, rising and falling with her breathing. I decided to start cooking and let her rest. While the grill was heating up, I checked the caller ID to see how many calls we had received. I was especially interested in whether any of the guys had called. There were 26 calls, 20 from Kara and 6 from Jane. That's kind of interesting, Sandy said behind me. At first, when I answered the phone, they immediately hung up. Later, Kara was at least polite enough to say that she wasn't sure if she should talk to me and that she would really like to talk to you, so could I please hang up so she can leave you a message? Jane, on the other hand, just cursed and hung up on me every time I answered. I poured her a glass of Kara's favorite wine, and we sat on the deck while our steaks grilled. Danny, I think you need to talk to someone about what's going on between you and my daughter. I'm not saying it should be me, but I'm here, I'm available, and I care. Besides, I'm already guessing what it is and I won't judge, but I think you need to talk it out before you burst. I'm fine, Sandy, I said. It doesn't even bother me anymore. I just need some time. Tough guy, huh? She said, smiling. Last night, a little after midnight, I got up to drink a glass of water. You know, I had to walk past your room to go down the stairs. I heard you crying in your sleep. It was the saddest thing. I've heard. I know it's tearing you apart, so you need to talk about it. If not with me, then with someone else. I stood up and turned the meat over. He sat back down next to Sandy and started talking. From the first moment I saw her, I was sure that Kara was the woman of my dreams. I knew she was pretty wild, but I really thought she calmed down when we started dating. I never saw so that she would even look at other guys, and I just never noticed other women when she was around. After about 2 years of dating, I proposed to her. She, of course, accepted it and asked what the hell took me so long for a long time. She told me that from the first words I ever spoke to her, she was mine. My heart belonged only to her. Well, at least, she had that part of me for herself. When our son Matthew was born, it was the happiest time of my life. During her pregnancy, I was too nervous to enjoy it the first time, but The second time, I took pictures and recorded all the changes in her body. They were good times for us. Now, I doubt the boys are even mine. We always went to parties and things like that, but we did it together. In the 8 years of our marriage and 2 years before that, I never had any reason to suspect anything. 4 days ago, at Jane's New Year's Eve party, I returned from buying the beer they sent me to and found Jane kissing on her couch in the middle of the living room with a guy she knew from work. If I hadn't interrupted them, who knows what it would have come to this. After talking to her, I'm sure it would have gone further. Not my business, not my concern or problem, but I was still angry. Randy is a good guy and he doesn't deserve this. Anyway, I decided to take Kara and leave. I eventually found her in the upstairs bedroom having sex with 5 guys. I haven't spoken to her since then. I intend to get a divorce as soon as possible. I loved her with all my heart and soul, and I want you to know that I truly intended to be with her forever, just like she said. I just feel so stupid because I loved her so much and she deceived me so much. At that moment, I started crying. Maybe it was a one-time thing. Maybe she was drunk or under the influence of something, Sandy said, looking down. I spoke to one of the guys who hadn't made it yet that night. He came back the next day to apologize and tell me everything. It seems like my wife has spent her whole life having sex with guys and just getting rid of them when she gets bored. I guess I was stupid enough to think that I meant something to her, when in fact I'm just another name on her long list. She's probably at Jane's right now and laughing at me, I said. Sandy came over to me and just hugged me while I cried. She turned off the grill because neither of us felt like eating after that. My name is Cara Masterson, and I have ruined my life. I was very wild my entire life. But when I went to college and left my grandparents who raised me, all hell broke loose. 3 days after my 18th birthday, I was no longer a virgin. Sex was just something I did to be social. I liked it and used it. I was never the most beautiful girl in college or in our group, but I knew how to use what I had to get what I wanted. My sister and I became quite popular both in college and after. Neither of us had actually graduated from university or had any plans to work. College was just a place for me to meet my boyfriend, and for Jane it was just a place to meet everyone's boyfriend. I always thought that men were deprived of sex because they gave up quickly. Some were able to recover quite quickly, but most were very limited. On the other hand, I could go on for hours. All I needed was a willing guy, or better yet, 3. And I was ready for the night. Once you've slept with a guy, you could also use that to get almost anything you want from him, especially if you teased him about the possibility of a repeat match in front of him. Sometimes my sister and I would take on 6 or 7 guys at a time. It was just for fun. The worst part was when you tried to be with the same guy. Neither guy could handle both of us, and they were always jealous. When I needed to break up with them, I had to either avoid them or walk through a minefield for a while so as not to hurt their damn feelings. I didn't have any myself. It was better this way. But everything changed when I met Danny. He was completely different from all the men I had ever met. There were many guys who could fill my flesh, but Danny filled my heart. I knew I was in trouble the first time we fought. Arguing was one of my favorite tools with most guys. If I was bored or wanted to have sex with another guy, I would just start a fight with them. And as long as we were technically broken up, I could sleep with whoever I wanted. It was easy. Are these pants making my ass look fat? Most guys don't know how to answer this. The correct answer is yes. Let's face it, I have a big ass for a white girl, but they'll never have the guts to tell me that. In any case, the first fight with Danny was our last so far. Firstly, it wasn't a fake fight, it was real. And secondly, because as soon as he left, I started crying. I felt like my heart was going to stop. I really wanted to die. My sister couldn't understand what happened. "Just give him some flesh and he'll come back," she said. Even she was shocked when she found out that I didn't have sex with him. Honestly, I was afraid that some magical thing between us would disappear if we had sex. We eventually got back together. I admitted that I was wrong because I simply could not live without him for a minute longer. Since then, we haven't quarreled anymore. When we started having sex, it opened a new chapter in my life. Sex with Danny was so different compared to any other guy. I really felt like it was something special. I stopped sleeping with others. The only time I broke this rule was once a year at my sister's New Year's party. For some reason, I just didn't consider it cheating. It was a kind of test. Once a year, I let a few guys have sex with me to see if I enjoyed it more than I did with Danny. I wasn't getting it, and I didn't like lying to him or making up an excuse to go to the party. The first time after we were together, I cried the whole next day because I was sure that if he found out, he would never want to see me again. I felt like such a cheater, but he didn't find out. The next year, it was easier, and then it just became, as I said, a test. I didn't know what to do if I ever failed the test, because I would never be able to leave it. I would rather die. After our wedding, it became more difficult until we came up with the idea of sending him out for beer or alcohol. The thing Danny loves most, besides me and our kids, is his Mustang. He sometimes drives a long way to buy things just to drive that car longer. He almost never lets me drive her. So while Danny went out for beer, I had sex with 3 or 4 guys. Anyway, last year I noticed something. I'm getting older, and I'm not as attractive as I used to be, and I'm sure you're thinking that sex with Danny has finally peaked. After all, there's this thing about the 7-year itch. But that wasn't the case. While I was lying on the bed with different guys, I noticed that I was bored. The 4 guys were working hard, and little me was the center of attention, and I was imagining my husband holding me and making love to me. That's when I decided that I couldn't do this anymore. Firstly, because I no longer enjoyed it, and I no longer needed it, even once a year, but also because I had too many losses. When Jane asked me about the party this year, I told her no, but she begged me, and finally said that we would let all the guys know that this would be my last time. A sort of farewell tour. So I agreed to do it again. Usually the best part of the party was at the end, when Jane and I were both in a room with at least 15 or 20 guys. Usually Danny would go home to pick up the kids while I helped Jane clean up after the party. All the couples and women went home, and the guys we chose stayed or left and came back. This year would have been no exception, but Murphy's Law changed my life forever. On the first beer trip, Danny returned much earlier than I expected. I actually lay there thinking about him, how he would make love to me tomorrow, and how from now on he would be the only one, and I had a smile on my face because I realized something really stupid. After 8, my God, years of marriage, I fell even more in love with my husband. I couldn't wait for him to come back to me, and I had plans for our next New Year. And suddenly, I heard a noise, which was unusual. Often the guys would get angry or fight over their place in line. Neither of them wanted to be left with anything, as I stood up and put on my clothes as Jane stood up to tell me Danny was back. I later found out that Jane quit her post. If she had been keeping an eye on Danny like she should have, nothing would have come of it. Anyway, I was about to yell that, if they didn't stop fighting, no one would get me anymore, when I looked up and saw Danny. At first, I didn't say anything because I was too shocked. This couldn't happen. He just said a few words that didn't even reach me. They didn't make sense. What did he mean by, never come home again? I had to get up and go home with him because I was sure he was mad at me. I'll fix it somehow. I'll do whatever he wants. Anything so we can get back to normal. I was so hurt that he never looked at me or listened to me. None of this was real. I ran out into the corridor naked. Some people at the party who didn't know what was going on started pointing at me, but I didn't care. Danny was talking to Jane. She was trying to get him to do or not do something. This was all getting out of control. I couldn't believe he was leaving and didn't want me anymore. I just sat on Jane's steps, naked, crying. Hardly anything reached me. I've heard people, especially some of the women I matched with men for years ago, call me an approachable girl, and some of them even laughed at me. Jane sent everyone home. It seemed my last performance was my last in many ways. Jane kept coming to me and telling me that I needed to get him to agree not to tell Randy what he saw. If she loses Randy, she'll have to find a job. I couldn't believe how damn stupid and selfish my sister was. Once you make up with your idiot, just make sure he doesn't tell my idiot what happened, she told me. She couldn't understand why I was crying. She just didn't understand. Finally, she looked at me like I was stupid and said, "You really love him, don't you?" She just sat there shaking her head as if she was having trouble understanding me. I didn't see how my life could get worse. The next day, Jane told me that Danny needed a few days to calm down and think. I said, "To hell with him, he may need it, but I'll die if I'm without him for that long." Jane finally convinced me that after a few days, he would start to miss me and be more willing to listen to my apology. I told myself that I would wait 2 or 3 days and then come home to him, even if I had to get on my knees and beg him to take me back. The next day, I thought I heard his Mustang pull up, and Jane looked outside and told me it was him. "Looks like the fool already misses you," she said. "Don't let him get the better of you or you'll have to eat crap for a long time. Make it look like you might not want him back. Make him think you're starting to miss him, that you're missing him. His ego will be wounded and you will be in control again." "Jane, shut up," I snapped at her. She just shrugged and went outside. By the time I came out, they were all talking. I called him and went to my husband. I just wanted him to hold me and tell me everything would be okay. Then I noticed that he had brought my car and some woman was driving it. At first I was angry, but I recognized her. It was our mother. I could deal with her later. Right now, I just needed my husband back. They could talk as much as they wanted. All I needed to know was if I could go home. I hoped Danny still loved me. I knew he did, because he went and found my mom, and he brought me my clothes so I could be comfortable while I waited for him. He even brought me my car so that when he called me, I could go home without having to wait for my stupid sister to drive me. Then I heard them talking again. I didn't understand most of it, but one name caught my attention. Ernie. Ernie was Danny's lawyer. Why does he need a lawyer? Then it dawned on me, and I started screaming and screaming. This couldn't happen. Why did he want a divorce? I was wrong. I already admitted it. This was the moment he had to forgive me and take me home, and we were supposed to live a happily ever after. There will be no divorce in this story. Then Danny and my mom just drove away, leaving me sitting in the driveway trying to figure out how to wake up. The next day, I just sat near the clock and called him again and again, hoping that at least once he would answer the phone. Even if he doesn't want to talk to me, I just needed to hear his voice. I also left him many messages. Jane tried to get me to eat, and I kept telling her that I would eat when I got home. I'm sure she thinks I'm crazy, but I don't trust her anymore. It's her fault after all. A few minutes ago, Jane called me to the door. A strange woman in a business suit handed me a stack of papers and made me sign a form that I had received. Danny is trying to divorce me. There was also a warrant keeping me away from my children. To be honest, I wasn't worried about the kids at all. Danny takes great care of them. He's a wonderful father. What really hurt me even more than the divorce was that he is doing a DNA test on our children to determine if he is their father. Their birthdays are in April and July. Since I only really cheated on him at New Year's parties, it's impossible for anyone else to be their father, but let him do the testing if he wants. This only depressed me even more. It made me realize that I had lost another aspect of my life. Because I was so wild when I was young, many people thought I was approachable, but Danny always considered me a princess or his angel. If he doubts the paternity of our children, it can only mean that he now also sees me as available girl. I thought about swallowing the whole bottle of pills Jane brought me to help me sleep until Jane told me he was coming to talk to us. I needed to shower and get dressed for him to want me again. I had to convince him that he didn't need to divorce me. I will do whatever he wants for the rest of my life just to get him to stay with me. After I got out of the shower and got dressed, Randy brought a man into the living room. Randy said that this man was a very good lawyer and would represent me. I told Randy I didn't need a lawyer, but he insisted. When Danny arrived, he was alone. He did not have his lawyer with him. I wanted to send everyone away so we could talk alone. I wanted us to sit on the swing on our porch and for him to just hold me, like when I carried his children. It was the best feeling of my life. Why did I throw this away? Danny said it was okay for my lawyer and Randy and Jane to stay. Jane was nervous. She said that she and Randy shouldn't stay because it was a private matter. But Danny wanted them and the lawyer to stay. Danny told me that he loved me very much, but that he couldn't be with me anymore because of what I did. I was focusing on the part about his love, but I still asked how long it would take for him to forgive me. When he said that he could never trust me again, so we couldn't be together, everything around me seemed to start to shrink. My lawyer suggested marriage counseling. Danny said he didn't think it would work. My lawyer said the court could order it. Danny asked my lawyer if he knew the facts of the case. The lawyer admitted that he did not know. That's when things got really bad. Danny recounted everything, including his meeting the next day with Joe. When the meeting ended, Randy stood up, gathered his things, and left. Jane, too. Jane became very angry and started crying and screaming at Danny. "You said that if I help you, you won't tell him," she screamed. Danny just laughed in her face and said she wasn't any help. "I haven't spoken since then. That was 4 months ago, and our divorce will be final in 8 weeks, and I haven't spoken a word to anyone since." According to the terms of the divorce, Randy agreed to take care of me until I could take care of myself. His insurance pays for the nurse and doctors I go to. Mostly I'm fine, I just decided not to talk to anyone until Danny forgives me. At least not publicly. Jane has tried dating and tried to find another man. But first of all, she's not getting any younger, and her big, sagging breasts aren't as attractive to them as they used to be. I guess guys don't have any thrill in winning someone that anyone can easily sleep with. Secondly, she discovered that she too was in love, and Randy wanted nothing more to do with her. Danny brings the kids to see me once a week. He doesn't have to, he just does it. Sometimes Mom comes with them. The day I met Kara and her lawyer bit was stressful for all of us. I intended to reveal all the details so that she would know what I wanted and why. I ended up telling Randy and Kara's lawyer the whole story. Randy was upset and demanded to see the photos, so I showed them to him. He thanked me, packed his bags, and left. He divorced Jane. It happened much faster for them than for me. Maybe Kara really loved me in her own way. She fell into a very deep depression. I make sure to take the boys to visit her once a week. One of the strangest things about this situation was that I needed someone to look after the boys after school and while I was at work. Who better than your own grandmother? Everything was going great until I started to notice that for a woman who was at least 10 years older than me, Sandy was much more attractive than I had ever noticed. I heard the whole story about how Sandy got pregnant with Jane at 19, and her parents pretended that Jane was Sandy's sister. But when she got pregnant again a few years later, they kicked her out of the house shortly after the birth of the child. Over the years, she tried to see her children again and again, and when she was finally allowed, their grandparents turned the girls so against her that it was no use. Now that they were finally old enough, she hoped they would give her a chance. But everything had gone to hell. Over these months, Sandy and I grew closer to each other until we both noticed that there was some sexual tension between us. One of the things I like most about Sandy is her honesty. "Oh, good thing it's not just me," she said one morning. "Well, I guess I should probably start looking for a place before something stupid happens." "What are you talking about, Sandy?" I asked her. "Well, I've been celibate for the last 10 years, she said. "But the last month or so, I've been horny as hell, and I must admit that I have feelings for you. But I'm your mother-in-law, and you are still married to my daughter, who is currently mad with grief. You will still be legally married to her for 7 or 8 weeks, although technically you are a free man." "Sandy, what are you talking about?" I asked again. "I just noticed how you were looking at my shirt," she began. "A few minutes ago, you were looking at my ass and my legs, and you have a tent in the front of your pants. Last night, while we were watching that stupid cartoon with the kids, I caught your eye on me 5 times, and when our eyes met, I realized that you wanted me, and not just for sex," she said. "You are happy again, perhaps not as happy as with my daughter, but it's as if a huge weight has been lifted from your soul. I have a feeling that if we continue living under the same roof, something stupid will eventually happen, so I should probably move in." "Sandy, this is your private space," I said. "You are family, and there is more than enough room for all of us. The boys love you. They are very confused right now about what is happening with their mom, and you are helping to fill that void. So for no one else, the reason is that you should stay." I told her, As for us, to be honest, I have to admit that I feel something for you. I probably felt it from the first minute you appeared. Maybe that's becoming more apparent now that Kara's situation has started to heal. I understand that there are problems here. Bastur in that's dotien destete. Fact that I married your daughter is an 800-pound gorilla that stands between us all the time. But to be honest, my relationship with Kara ended before you even came to the city. You didn't do anything to stop this. It's all her credit. If you had come along while we were still together, you would have seen that hell or high water couldn't tear us apart. But I think our love was not flexible enough to last more than 5 years. I looked into her eyes when I told her this. You should also know that no matter how I feel about you, even if over time it becomes even stronger than it is now, I will never force you to do anything you don't like. There was a long silence, and then she nodded her head. We sat on the couch at opposite ends, both hands reaching towards each other, but not touching each other. I had a feeling that we were going to take each other's hands. It was a really strong feeling that was shattered when Jane's loud voice said, "What the hell is going on here?" We looked towards the door, and there she stood and looked at us. I come here hoping to talk to you after all the hell you put us through, and I see you sitting here trying to get romantically involved with the whore of Babylon, Jane screamed. I turned my head to face her, and in the coldest voice I could muster, I told her, "Jane, either calm down or get out of my house. Nobody invited you here. I'm tired of you constantly blaming other people for your shortcomings. Most of the time, you have a lot more to do with what's going on than people think. Do you call anyone else an available girl? Isn't it the pot calling the kettle black?" Jane just sat there with her mouth open. Then, in a calm voice, she began to speak. "Danny, I know you almost divorced Kara, but that's the key word here. Almost. You're right when you say that I had more to do with your breakup and my own breakup. If I had done my job and warned Kara that night instead of trying to get myself some man, you would never have found out about her, and you two would continue to be as happy as you are now. My sister is wasting away. They may keep her body healthy, but her mind is simply fading away. Her doctors think it's some form of guilt influenced by her relapse. Some of them who know the whole story think that if you could find it in your heart, at least pretend to forgive her, it will help get her back. Once she is healthy again, you can gradually break up with her. I know it's a lot to ask, but could you please consider this?" she said, looking at me. "Danny, she sometimes wakes up in the middle of the night and calls for you. Besides, I haven't heard her say a word since you told her you were divorcing her at the meeting with her lawyer. Please, Danny, she gave you 8 good years. And although she wasn't completely honest with you, the only time she cheated on you were at those stupid parties. I know she made you happy too. So isn't 8 years of happiness worth a few weeks of pretending? Besides, shouldn't you at least spend some time with her to see if you're really done with her? You don't look or act your normal self either. As angry as you are at her, you look like you're missing a piece of your soul." Well, I've said everything I wanted to say, and I'm sorry for disturbing what was going on here. Jane turned and left as quickly and quietly as she had come. Needless to say, the mood in the house changed after that. The next morning, Sandy brought it up. "Danny, I think you need to do this," she said without preamble. I was having breakfast before heading to work, and the boys were watching another morning cartoon show. "Your room or mine?" I asked. "But shouldn't we wait until the boys are asleep?" "That's not it, silly," she said seriously. "But if there's any chance of it, if it's something real, then it can wait a few weeks. Jane is a bitch. I can say that because I'm her mother, and because there was a time when I was just as big of a cheater and a bitch as she is now. Someday I'll tell you about it. But bitch or not, she was right on 2 counts. First, even if your marriage wasn't perfect, although I know it was like that, I think we should give Kara a chance to get better, even just so you don't end up with her medical bills for the rest of your life. But also because if, and now I'm just saying if, there will be something between us, the way it is between you and me, this thing with you and Kara needs to be resolved. Jane, the bitch, was right again when she said you were missing something. For us to move forward, I need you whole and unharmed, not looking back and comparing me to my daughter every time we have a problem. And I know that of all of us, this will be the hardest for you," she said. Jane will kick Kara out of her house for a while. I'll be able to spend at least some time with one of my daughters, and even the boys will get their mother back, or what's left of her, for a little while. You'll be the one who gets hurt the most by this. We'll make you spend some very intimate time with the person who hurt you the most than anyone else. But she's also the person you love the most, so maybe we can see what's really meant to be. As she said this, she put more bacon on my plate. The next day was Saturday. I was up early, and before I could leave the house, I ran into Sandy, who, as usual, was preparing a huge breakfast for me and the boys. She caught me looking at her as usual and walked over to me. I didn't know what to expect from her, but what I got wasn't it. She hugged me tightly, and her warm, soft body pressed against me and caused an immediate reaction. I just want to thank you for trying to do this, she told me. If this is the kind of gratitude I can get used to, I'll try something new every day, I joked. She shyly moved away from me. Danny, sit down for a minute, she said. I don't know what's going to happen with you and Kara. I really hope for my daughter's sake that while she's here, she'll come out of her crisis or whatever it was, and that you can be together again. I really believe she loves you, and I hope for the best for both of you. But if it doesn't work out that way, I'm willing to try us. But I have to warn you about some things. First of all, I may be partly to blame for the way my girls turned out. I was just like them at their age and younger, so you don't get someone who is pure as snow. But I've been through so many things that were a direct result of my behavior and lifestyle and ended up not getting nothing in return. The situation got so bad that guys would just come and expect that they could sleep with me and just leave after that. I had no friends, and I had already lost my family. When I eventually got sick, I had no one to call for. I took a serious look at my life and realized that I didn't have it. Everyone I knew was married or in a long-term relationship. It's funny, but a lot of women were jealous of me. I couldn't understand why. Oh yeah, every time when there was a party, there were a lot of guys around me, but they were only there for one reason. They didn't want to talk to me, didn't want to talk to me about my day or spend time with me. They didn't really want me at all. They only wanted one small part of me. So I just decided to give up sex. And after that, even when I went to parties, once word got out, I was quite lonely at parties too. I know what I want from life and from relationships now. I want what you had with my daughter. I want what we have now, only with a little, okay, much more intimacy. I like it when you come home and ask me about my day and tell me about yours. In my entire life, you're the first man who actually wanted to know more. I love it when you go out there and wash that damn car that you washed the day before, although there's not a speck of her while I'm cooking dinner. I even like it when you think I'm not looking and try to peek through the holes in the legs of my shorts from underneath the car. I really like it when we sit under the blanket and eat ice cream while my grandchildren fall asleep in front of the TV. And I look forward to the day when we go to sleep in the same room after we put them to bed. She took my hand as she said all this. Danny, I may not be the best woman in the world. I may not even be the best woman in the world for you. We may have a whole bunch of problems that we don't even know about. But I promise you that if you and Kara have nothing will work out, I will be the most faithful woman you have ever had. You will never have to worry about me cheating on you. I learned the hard way that there is a big difference between love and sex, and I know what I need for the rest of my life. Damn it, I said. Sandy, why are you telling me this now? I had to get up and move away from her. She laughed as I tried to control my excitement. I just don't understand women. You know what I have to do today. You also know that the only reason I'm even trying to do this is because you want it. I told you, like everyone else, that my marriage, Kara, will be legally over in a few weeks. From the first second I saw her in that room with all those guys, there was no hope for us. So for the next few weeks, I'll have to pretend around her while I do all this. I'll want you for a while. It won't be easy. She reached out to hug me again, and I stepped back. Oh no, I'm afraid to think what might happen if I follow Kara excitedly. I blew her a kiss, and she made a big theatrical gesture, catching it and placing it on her lips. I pulled into Jane's driveway with a smile on my lips and a song in my heart. Oh, damn, I thought, remembering what happened the last time I was here, and I was so happy. Jane opened the door and smiled at me. Then she just led me to the room where Kara was staying. Kara sat on the edge of the bed. She saw me enter the room and watched my every move. I saw her turn her head to watch me as I looked around the room. This was different. Usually, when I brought the boys to visit, I just stayed in the car. I literally haven't spoken to her since meeting her. "Kara, honey, we're going home, if that's okay," I said. Jane and I watched as she smiled a little and her eyes became a little brighter. I held out my hands, and to my surprise, she stood up and walked towards me. I didn't know how long she would stay, or even if it would work, so I only packed a few outfits for her. For the following weeks, Kara stayed in the house with me, Sandy, and the boys. During the day, she sat quietly and watched the boys and kept an eye on Sandy. In the evening, she started following me wherever I went. At night, she slept in bed with me. Usually by morning, we found ourselves next to each other. Then one morning, she grabbed my hand as I started to get out of bed and said, "No." It was the first word she had spoken in weeks. I called the doctors later that day and told them about it. They agreed that it was a big breakthrough. I started counting down the days until this farce was over, and I could be with Sandy. The next morning, I woke up and Kara was wrapped around me, her arms wrapped around my waist, and one of her legs draped over mine. Her nightgown lifted up to position her legs so I could see everything she had. I smiled at her as I got out of bed, and she pouted a little. It was another small step forward. The next morning was an even bigger step. I always went to bed facing away from Kara. I faced the windows when I slept, and there was usually about a foot of space between me and the edge of the bed. When I woke up in the morning, Kara had apparently gotten out of bed and walked around to lie on my other side. My back was pressed against her. My arms were wrapped around her. My right hand, the top one, was holding one of her breasts, and her hand was on top of mine, pressing on it. She pressed her buttocks towards me. My other hand was locked in hers. She smiled at me when I opened my eyes. "Hi," she said. This was another big step, and I could see where the steps were headed. But the problem was that it wasn't where I wanted to go. Kara's therapist thought it was incredible. He said she is slowly trying to regain some intimacy and, through that, normalcy in her life. Since sex destroyed our relationship, perhaps it could restore it. I told him that would never happen. He warned me not to reject her outright because it might lead to regression, and neither of us wanted that. Sandy agreed with him, but I could see that her heart didn't believe it. The next morning, the same thing happened again, except that somehow, while she was changing positions in bed, all her clothes suddenly came off. My right hand was rubbing her breasts. Kara made little sweet sounds as she pressed her buttocks against me. As I started to stand up, she grabbed my leg to stop me. "Please, Danny, I need you," she said, her first full sentence in a very long time. "You have me, Kara. I'm just going to work," I said gently. "I need you inside me," she said in an almost pleading tone. "Soon," I told her. "I'm not sure you're ready for that." "I was ready for this even before you left me," she said. I told Sandy about the incident and conversation, and noticed that she seemed a little sad, but she told me to do what I thought was right. That day at work, I had a visitor. Joe Stevens walked into my office and he looked miserable. "Joe, why did you come?" I asked. "Remember when I told you that I wanted to make things right between us?" he asked. "Yeah, Joe, I didn't tell your wife or mention you in my divorce. I got some money from other guys, and a couple of them are going through divorces too, but I never mentioned you," I said. "I know that, and like I told you, I came out to Dorothy, and it took a while, but she forgave me, and I'm still sober," he said. "But I happened to hear something that really pissed me off, and I wanted you to hear it too." Joe played for me a recording he made on his cell phone recorder. I think he expected me to be really angry, but I smiled as I listened to her. It was the funniest thing I've heard in a long time. That night, after Sandy put the boys to bed, we sat on the living room couch. Kara sat on the love seat and began to yawn, which was usually the signal for us to go to bed. She was wearing another sheer silk nightgown, similar to the one that had disappeared the night before. She sat there looking at me and yawned again, but she didn't say anything. While she watched, I put my arm around Sandy and began to gently stroke her arm. Kara began to yawn more often, and from the corner of my eye I could see that she didn't like it at all. I turned around and started biting Sandy's ear, and Sandy pressed herself against me. I pulled her onto my lap and began to stroke her long, well-shaped legs. "You really need to stop," Sandy said. "It's been a long time for me, and you might not be able to handle what you're unleashing. It'll be midnight in a few moments, and I'll be officially divorced, so maybe I'm ready for a little release." I laughed. "Us single guys need to take every chance." Sandy lifted her skirt a little, then moved to sit next to me, leaning in for our first kiss. I liked the way she smelled and the way she kissed. Gently at first, but gradually increasing the intensity until Kara was forgotten. I noticed that Kara had stood up and was looking at us intently. I pulled Sandy's sweater out of her skirt and slid my hand underneath it, caressing her large breasts through her bra. If anything could get Kara's attention, it was this. She was always jealous that her breasts were small. It never bothered me because her ass always made up for it, but it did annoy her. Today was no exception, and I could see that she was seething with anger. "Oh God, I can't wait to touch those breasts," I said, lifting the cups of her bra and releasing them. For the record, they were, and still are, the most perfect breasts I have ever seen. They have a little sag in them, but they're still so full and round and soft that I forget what I'm doing every time I see them. "Damn it! What the hell are you doing?" Kara screamed. "You're just going to have sex with my mother right here in front of me? I'm your wife, not her. I'm not going to put up with that crap. I'm here if you want sex that badly, and you won't get it from anyone but me. This is nonsense, Danny. I've been shoving myself at you for almost a week, and you're starting to pester my bitch mother. I know you think I must be some kind of depressed, but I'm conscious. I see what is happening around me, and I will never tolerate this crap. I've been waiting for months to get you back in my damn bed where you belong, and just when you're almost there, when we're almost together again, you drag it out. How can you go so low? I want you to leave here, Mom. There can only be one woman in this house. And you're not her," I said calmly, interrupting her. "What are you talking about, Danny?" she asked, her face showing anger and shock. "Kara, the game is over and you lost," I told her. "A man came to see me at work today and he brought me something very interesting that I would like you to hear." I picked up Joe's cell phone and pressed play. Jane's voice, shrill and arrogant, sounded loud and clear. "Yes, you can come tonight. You could have come the night Randy left if you wanted." "Yes," she returned to her home. "But she wouldn't care if you came. She might even join Anila. She hasn't had anything since the idiot left her, but she has a plan to get him back, although why she wants this is a mystery to me. No, she's not sick, it's just part of her plan. She also deceived all the psychiatrists. She knew that eventually they would try something like him visiting her and inviting her on little family outings, and then her starting with little hugs and kisses and gradually getting him to where she wanted him. She was even surprised when the dumbass doctor started talking about moving her back into the house with him, and the idiot bought it. We all know that once that little bitch gets him back between her legs, he won't let her. Damn, for the last 8 fucking years he's been so happy that he didn't even know she had half the town every New Year's Eve. What's even dumber is that she even thinks she loves him. Yes, I also went through this once when I was young. I imagine in a couple of years she'll be playing June Cleaver and she'll be pulling her holiday trains again. She's an even more approachable girl than me. At least I can be happy with one extra guy, but she never will. I turned off the film and looked at her face for a long time before she said something. "Danny, I was really depressed. I just needed you back. I just didn't want to continue without you. What you heard on that tape wasn't what I feel. It's just what Jane thinks. All I want is for us to try again. If you give me another chance, this will never happen again. Kara, as you already know, I have loved you with all my heart for the last 10 years, and a part of me will always love. But watching your holiday performance just ruined that love. She was never real anyway. When you love someone, you give your heart and soul only to them. And you do it with no strings attached. No, I belong only to you, Danny, 364 days a year, and then on New Year's Eve I go out and sleep with everyone I can find. How did you think I would react when I found out? Or did you just think I was so stupid that I would never? Eventually, someone would say something to someone, and I would hear about it, and you should have known it. I'm just surprised it took me so long to find out about it. Let me ask you a question before you go, Kara. How did you feel when you saw me kiss Sandy? You were very angry, weren't you? Why? I asked her. Because she shouldn't be putting her fucking lips on my husband. You belong to me, Danny, not to her or anyone else. I think I'm starting to see the pain you've been through. Until now, all I felt was the pain of losing you. So maybe playing with my mother was helpful for something. This is a good start, Kara, I said, smiling at her. She smiled back until I told her. You only missed 2 things. First of all, 2 minutes ago I was no longer your husband. Secondly, Sandy and I didn't act. As for giving you another chance, Kara, in my opinion, you've already been given 10 chances, and you've chosen wrong every time. For the 2 years we dated, I was faithful to you. And in both of these years, you had the choice to be faithful to me or cheat on me with several partners on New Year's Eve. Both times, you made the wrong choice. Then we got married, and you had 8 more chances to make the right choice, and 8 times you chose what I think was the wrong choice. I was even told that you weren't enjoying it anymore and were planning on giving it up. If that was true, then why did you do it this year? Kara, I need someone who will choose me, our life, and our children instead of cheating with other men at least once a year, at least once a century. I need someone who will make that right choice, not after he gets tired of his parties, but the first time and every time after that. I loved you, Kara, but you are now my past. I need to find my future. Oh, and by the way, you should probably call Jane to come get you because I forgot to tell you that the restrictive order is still in effect. Why the hell would I call Jane? She answered sharply. She is the one who ruins my life all the time. I just thought bitches tended to bunch together, I said as I started pushing Sandy up the stairs. I know some of you are in shock right now, thinking, he chose her mother. Yes, I chose. And it's even worse than you think. I married Sandy the next day. Anyway, we are still happy and still together 5 years later. Kara sometimes comes in to see the kids and scolds me and Sandy. She continues to ask me for another chance and claims that she is now abstinent herself. I'm not entirely sure I believe her, but I'm absolutely sure that I don't care. She now lives in the house where Jane and Randy used to live. Randy married one of the female officers he works with, and he's happy too. Jane never gave up her New Year's parties and contracted a strange, virulent form of venereal disease. Unfortunately, when she was diagnosed, the only remedy was surgery, and she died from complications during surgery. It looks like they were right about at least one thing, at least for Kara and me, that New Year was our last. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.